how to locate a point where it is, or point charge, how to locate a point charge. Yes. So, reference frame is a must to understand physics, right. Reference frame is a must to understand physics. That may be in your mind, but must. Without that, you can never understand physics. It is never visible, but it should be in your mind. Where is the reference frame? Right. So, in that way, how can you represent a point charge? For example, let us say here I will tell there is q plus charge, that is a point charge. If it has no dimension, it is point charge, right. Charge are concentrated at one point, then it is point charge. Let it be plus q, right. But how to locate where it is? Unless you locate, you cannot tell anything about it. Where is the field, where it will go, everything, right. Then how to locate it? There must be a reference frame, may be visible or not. You have to locate it only with respect to that reference frame, right. For example, if I will take my reference frame here, maybe let this is my origin of the coordinate system, then I can locate it by joining this point, right. Otherwise not, it has no meaning. So, if you are not taking this reference frame, you can never locate any point in space, right, any point, may it be point charge, anything. If you want to locate, you must have to take a reference frame. That frame may be visible or not. It is visible here, may not be visible, but you must have to tell in terms of the reference frame only, right. So, if this is your x direction, this is your y direction, and this is your z direction, when they meet, that point is called as the reference point of the reference frame, which we call as the origin if it is coordinate system, right. So, when you are telling that at this point it is there, then naturally there is a vector, right, connecting that point from that origin or reference point. What that vector is? Position vector of what? That point with respect to what? Reference frame. Clear? If you tell about the point, you must have to know what is the position vector, from where it starts, where it ends, and with respect to which reference frame. Then only it is clear, otherwise not. If I will represent this point by x, y, z, obviously the meaning is clear. All are with respect to the reference frame only, right. Otherwise, if you simply tell q with point charge, no meaning. Position must be identified by the coordinates. They are here x, y, and z in space, right. To locate that, you are choosing a reference frame, and there is a position vector connecting the origin to that point, which is represented as r vector. Usual symbol is r, position vector, right. Then obviously you can tell now how can you represent the r in terms of components. It has 3 components, right. It has 3 components, then how can you represent that r vector? Component means you have to draw perpendicular to 3 axes and multiply that by the unit vector in that direction, that is all, right. So, 3 components, 3 unit vectors, add them all, get the r vector, right. Then obviously I can write r x, x cap, right, r y, y cap plus r z, z cap, right. So, that position vector r can be represented in its component form in this way, where x cap, y cap, z cap are the unit vectors along x, y, and z directions respectively, and r x, r y, r z are the components of that position vector along x, y, and z direction. Then this can be represented by this formula, right. Like that, any point can be well defined like that, any point, anywhere. Otherwise, you can never define any point anywhere. So, there must be a reference frame. With respect to that, everything is clear, otherwise it is never clear, never visible. Frame may be invisible, but the point should be visible to you, right. The point should be visible to you. The reference frame may or may not be visible, but the point must be visible to you all, and it is possible only when you choose a reference frame, otherwise not, right. So, then now if you go to a field, how can you represent point charges or interaction of another charge within the field of other? How will you represent? Let us say this is the charge q and obviously you can tell field is around it, which is invisible, but it is there around it, and field lines are there also. Then how can you tell if another charge is interacting within that range, whether it is interacting or not? How to know it? Then only to consider that as a field or not. If it has its own field which is visible and not visible to us, but it has boundary, right? It has boundary, and when you bring another charge within that boundary, that charge will be affected, interacted with this field. As a result, the force will experience, right? The force will be experienced. But if there is no other charge, no interaction. You cannot know up to what limit the field is extended. Without that charge, you can never know where is the boundary. But if you take another charge, it can tell you that up to what there is boundary, because beyond that there is no interaction. Two fields are not interacting, hence there is no force. So when you take another point charge, let us say I will take this point as q1, right? Another charge, let us say q1, then you have to locate it first by again another point vector, right? Obviously both are in the field, and this is your source charge, this is your test charge. Source means by which the field is created. Test means you are testing up to what limit the field is existing. So there are two charges, one is source charge, other is the test charge, and usually test charge is taken to be unit, but not necessarily, you can take any charge, right? If you take unit charge, you tell that is the intensity at that point, otherwise not, right? If I will tell it is a unit charge, then the force itself is called as the intensity at that point. But if it is other than unit charge, there is interaction, right? There is interaction between the two charges. So you have to know what is the distance between these two, right? What is the distance between these two? So if I will tell my source charge is represented as Rs vector, position vector for source charge. Similarly, this is for the test charge RT position vector, then positions are well cleared now for both source and test. Then what will be this vector? Let that vector is R vector, right? That vector is R vector, that is the distance between the two charges, source and test. If this is the distance between these two charges, then now we have to know what this distance is, because if you go for the Coulomb's law, the force is nothing but equal to K times Q1, Q2. If it is Q1, it is Q2, let us say, divided by this R square, right, and direction. You mean this direction now? What I put this R cap? It is along R, right? It can never go beyond R. It should be along the R only. R is this one. So direction may be this side or that side. There, how will you know it? How will you know in what direction that force is existing between the two charges? Because cannot be both the direction. Force has only one direction because it is vector, right? So if I will tell force acting on this charge, then obviously the direction should be with reference to that point, right? This is source, all the time it is the source. You have taken a test charge here, so what is the force experienced by that test charge? Then how will you know the direction? What is the direction? If source is positive, and this test charge must be positive all the time, it cannot be negative, but source may be positive or negative, right? Source charge may be positive or negative, accordingly the field lines are different and field is different, but test charge cannot be negative, it must be positive only, right? Then if this is the positive charge and you are taking again a positive charge which is test charge, then how much force it will experience? This much force. What is the direction of this unit vector now? R cap, otherwise force has no meaning, it is a vector, right? So obviously I can tell now, if I will go in this direction, triangle law resultant, right, then Rs plus R vector is nothing but equal to RT vector, right? It must valid because they are vectors, right? So then now what is your R vector? It is RT vector minus Rx vector. Now you know what is the direction of that R vector or not? What is the direction of that R vector? Because if I will put a positive charge here, the direction must be here, it should be repelled. along that direction. Both are positive, right? Both are positive. Source charge is positive, test charge is also positive, so they will repel each other. When you are finding the force on this test charge, then obviously it goes in that direction, and that is implied by this vector, right? Clear now? How much force in what direction, everything is clear, right? Magnitude is this, direction is this, because what is the r cap vector? It is nothing but equal to r vector divided by mod of r vector. Any unit vector can be defined in that way. If you divide it by the magnitude, it will give all the time unit vector, or not? So therefore, r cap is nothing but equal to r vector divided by magnitude of that vector. So the magnitude of r vector means, what does it mean? R x, x cap, actually vector is this. Similarly, r y, y cap, r z and z cap, obviously modulus, or not? But magnitude means it is only, right, this is only magnitude of r vector, and that tells what is your unit vector direction. R vector direction is clear, magnitude is clear, then unit vector in that direction is the unit vector r cap. This, to know the force, you must have to understand what is that r cap, right? So therefore, when you are dealing with a field, this situation all the time comes, all the time. There must be a source charge and there must be a test charge, and accordingly you can find out the force acting on the test charge, right? But if I will take here negative charge, then what will happen? You have to go in the opposite direction, no problem, same vector law, triangle law, this plus this equal to this, right? Then that force cannot be repulsive all the time, attractive, right? It cannot be repulsive, it must be attractive. So accordingly this direction will change, you can check it. What happens with positive charge and how it changes with negative charge, because source charge can be positive or negative, but test charge is all the time positive, right? Test charge can never be negative, all the time positive. So therefore now you know how to represent a charge in the field, and how will you find out the force or interaction of another charge, that is the test charge, due to that field. Interaction means who are interacting, that gives rise to force. How you are getting, what is the origin of force? Any force, any interaction. Yes, without interaction of field, no chance of any force, may it be strong, weak, electromagnetic or gravitational. Whatever interaction it may be, it is only because of the interaction of fields, right? Without interaction of field, there is no force existing in this nature. So therefore, to understand the interaction, you must have to understand the field, right? And what is the nature of that field, behavior of that field, character of that field, and they are all defined by the field lines or lines of forces, right? Field is defined only by lines of forces or field lines. So if you want to characterize a field, you must have to understand field lines, behavior of the field lines, character of the field lines, then only you can characterize any field. So now you know the, here what this k is, there is a constant, right? Coulomb's law tells there is a constant. What that k is, what constant it is, how will you define that constant? Constant have value, definite value, what that value is? This k is how much? 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0, right, where epsilon is the free space, or you can write this, free space is 0 if there is no medium, vacuum or air, that is free space. Even air is treated to be free space, right? Even though there is air, but it is treated to be free space. So therefore it is the permittivity of the free space. If it is epsilon 0, it has constant value, right? But you can represent this as relative, E epsilon r, or simply epsilon, that is relative permittivity of that medium, right? If it is other than vacuum and air, the force will be different because k is different, right? So if in between these two charges there is air or vacuum, then obviously I can tell what is the value of this relative permittivity. It is 1, right? Relativity permittivity of air or vacuum is 1. So therefore the force will be 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 multiplied by this magnitude and direction. But if it is other than air or vacuum, then there will be relative permittivity, which is sometimes called as the dielectric constant of the medium. Same thing, relative permittivity of a medium is the dielectric constant of that medium, right? So every medium has its dielectric constant, that is the relative permittivity, right? Relative permittivity means how much field lines it will allow with respect to free space, right? If free space takes this much lines, when there is a medium, how much lines it will allow or disallow. That property of the medium is called as the dielectric behavior, right? So, this relative permittivity is also sometimes called as K, dielectric constant of the medium, and that is the reason why you might know when you take you know about sodium chloride, all of you might have tested it, right, every day. What is that? Sodium and chlorine, right? If you put it inside a beaker of water, what will happen there? When there is air, vacuum, it is sodium chloride, right? Because they are of course, which kind of interaction is existing between them? What kind of bonding? Bonding is interaction, ionic bonding, right? Two kinds of ions are there, positive and negative, sodium positive and chlorine negative. As a result, there is attractive force that you can determine using the same formula, right? How much force is existing between the sodium and chlorine when they are in air, right? That you can calculate. If you know the quantity of charge there in sodium, quantity of charge there in chlorine, and they should be same because sodium chloride is neutral, one positive, other negative. Sodium chloride is neutral, right? But there is some force, some interaction which bind them together to tell us as it is sodium chloride molecule, right? It is sodium chloride molecule, it is neutral, but obviously there is electrostatic force that binds them together, which you call as the ionic bond. That interaction is the ionic bond, right? So, now what will happen if the same sodium chloride, I will put it inside water, a beaker of water, right? A pinch of sodium chloride put inside some volume of water in the beaker, then what will happen there? You realized every day, may not be of course drinking salty water, but if you want you can check it, and what is the difference you are marking there? Have you ever marked? Sodium chloride is, you have seen it, right? What is sodium chloride? You have seen it. What is water? You have seen it. Have you seen ever the interaction between sodium chloride and water? Sodium chloride and water interaction. What happens there? Yes, that is the science, right? Dissociation is the science. What does it mean? These ions are separated, right? The ionic bond breaks, then only there is chance of dissociation, right? But when you put in water, there is dissociation. Before that, there is no dissociation. What is the reason, right? When you put it in water, they dissociate, but when they are in air, no chance of dissociation. Why it happens so? Am I right? What I am telling is correct or wrong? Correct? Then find out the reason and tell. Why they dissociate? Why the two ions are dissociating when they are put in water? What happens there? So, the two ions are now separated or dissociated. Where is the chance of polarity? I am not telling about water now. I am asking about the sodium chloride, how they dissociate. Which one is greater? Epsilon r. Then in air, water it is? Yes, that makes the difference. You see, K value will be how many times smaller now? 80 times smaller when it is in air. That makes this force very weak and hence dissociate. You compare how much force is existing when they are in air, but when you put in water, how much weak that force will be? 80 times weaker, right? Because of that dielectric constant of water is air, which comes in between two ions, right? The medium now is water, no more air or vacuum. So, when that medium comes, this epsilon r comes. For water it is 80, hence the force is reduced by 80 times, and as a result they dissociate, and that process is dissociation, right? That process is dissociation. Hence, after dissociation, there will be no sodium chloride, rather you will get sodium ions and chlorine ions altogether, right? There is no more sodium chloride because dissociation takes place. All sodium chloride molecules are dissociated to give us sodium plus ion and chlorine minus ion. So, it is an ionized solution where ions are present, both positive and negative. So, things in air and vacuum is different than things when you put in water, right, and that is made by the dielectric constant of water. The Coulombian force between the two ions are now reduced by 80 times, and since that force or interaction is reduced, they dissociated. That is called as dissociation. It happens like that for any other molecules you can consider. Dissociation means that, right? Dissociation means that if anything dissociates in any solution, obviously tells that the dielectric constant of the medium where it is reduced. That is why they are going to ionic form. Ions are there. Before that, that is neutral, but when you put in medium, they dissociate. That is the reason, right. So, therefore, the role of this K is very important to understand what medium you are considering. That depends on the medium, epsilon r, dielectric constant of the medium, right. So, then now we will go for that calculus part, right. Have you read it? Do you have any idea on that? What that vector calculus means? Algebra part is over, transformation part is over, how to represent the charge and field is also clear, right. Then next calculus, and they are all relevant to electricity and magnetism. That is why you have to learn, right, you have to learn it, otherwise you cannot understand electricity and magnetism. So, when you are telling it is vector calculus, what do you mean? Algebra is over, you know it, what is that algebra and what you can do with that, right. Why you are learning? Because it is essential to understand electricity and magnetism. Similarly, vector calculus is also essential to understand electricity and magnetism. Then what is that vector calculus? What do you mean by that? You might have read calculus in mathematics, right? What does it mean? Because the meaning is all same. Meaning of calculus is not different in mathematics and physics, right? What does it mean? You see, there are two processes involved in calculus, only two, right? One is differentiation, another is integration. One is differential calculus, other is integral calculus. But what they do? Calculus is obviously of two kinds, right? One is called as differential and the other one is called as integral, right? Then what is differentiation and what is integration? What is the physical significance of these two processes? Because they are processes, may it be mathematical or physical, that does not matter. It is process. What that process means? Which one? Integration or differentiation? Both. No, you are wrong. Anybody? Rate of? Huh? Of what? With respect to variable. But the differentiation process itself tells something else. Differentiation process I am telling. The logic behind differentiation is different, what you are telling. That is a process, right? What that logic tells. You see, for example, I am just giving an example. Let us take a piece of gold, right? Pure gold, no impurity, right? It has some specific property, all of you know it, right? What is that? What that property you know about gold? Pure gold again. What property? First tell me the color. That is also a property which is not there with others, right? Color. It looks yellow. No other material never looks yellow. If it is gold, it must be. And that is the behavior and character of gold, right? That is an optical property of gold. Gold has many properties: electrical, magnetic, optical, mechanical, many, right? But if you deal with the optical property, it tells it has yellow color, right? It has yellow color. then now the question is from where that color come? Why it looks yellow? Why silver is not looking yellow? It looks white. Platinum is not looks yellow. Why gold looks yellow? Some character must be associated. That's a reason why you are telling gold looks yellow. What is that? From where that property is originated, that color? Because if it looks yellow, you know there are how many colors you have seen? 7. In the visible range, we have only 7 colors. Vibgor, starting from violet to red. Yellow is in between. Right? Yellow color is in between or not? What this gold looks? It is a visible range. We are detecting. Our eye can well recognize, yes, this piece is gold. Because eye is the detector to detect that color, yellow. Right? No other device is required for us. Eye itself is the detector which can detect that color. And we are detecting. But from where that color comes? If it is detected, then natural there will be some origin from where it comes. If yellow color is there must be some origin from where that color arises, radiation arises. It is an electromagnetic radiation, no doubt, but there must be some origin. What is that is? From where it comes? Why it looks yellow? And that is the property associated with an gold atom. Gold atom. Right? If you analyze the gold atom, you can understand from where that color is coming. Right? So, what I mean to say, if I will tell gold looks yellow, obviously it represents its atom also having that character. You cannot deny it, because the origin is all the time from atoms, molecules, ions, nothing else, depending on the composition of the material. If it is pure atom, if it is compound, different kinds of atoms or ions, right. So, therefore, all the behaviors, characters, properties of any material, may it be solid, liquid, gas, plasma, must be originated from that level only. Atoms, molecules, ions, nothing else. So, you must have to understand the behavior, character associated with those atoms and molecules and ions. Otherwise, you can never understand any material. Right? If you want to characterize a material, what does it mean? Characterization of a material. Any material, whatever it may be, it is nothing but the structure property relation. Right? Characterization means structure property relation, but that structure is not external structure. That structure is not external structure. That structure associated with atoms, molecules and ions of that material. You have to understand that structure, otherwise you can never characterize any material. What will be its thermal property? What will be its electrical property? Everything is originated from that level. How the atoms, molecules and ions are arranged within that. That is the structure, fine structure. So, to know about the property of any material, you must have to understand that kind of structure, which is very, very important. Then only can characterize, otherwise not. Characterization is nothing but the structure property relation, right? Like for us, somebody if asks you what is your character, what does it mean? What does it mean? Character means that is a speciality with you. You are different than others. That is your character, which is not there with others. That means something extra, additional things are there with you. That's where character is different than others. Nobody's character never matches. Never. There must be something different that you have to identify. But how to identify? You have to reach at that level to understand the character. Right? To understand somebody's character, you must have to reach at that level to see whether the character of all are similar or dissimilar. And it can never be similar, never. And that is the reason why materials are behaving differently, because their characters are different, their structural arrangement is different. If the arrangement is differing, then accordingly the property is differing, behavior is differing. For example, if I tell gold, it looks yellow, right? It is bulk gold. You know about bulk material. Piece of gold is bulk, right? But when I made a thin film of the same gold, it will never look yellow. Try to understand. Same gold atoms, but you made something in the arrangement of the atoms. That's why telling it is thin film gold, gold thin film. Same gold atoms, but arrangement, bulk and thin film are different. You made it. That's why you are telling it is thin film gold, right? And similarly, if I will get nano gold, you don't have neither the thin film property nor the bulk property, although the gold atoms are everywhere there, right? In bulk it is there, in thin film it is there, in nano also it is there. Only gold atoms, nothing else. That's why gold word is common, but you are telling it is bulk gold, then thin film gold, and then nano gold, right? Gold word is common everywhere. So what does it mean then? Everywhere gold atoms are involved, everywhere. But the gold atoms involved in bulk is not in the similar kind of arrangement when you go to thin film. It is different arrangement. If you go to nano, again it is different. That's why it is nano gold. So what happens then from bulk to thin film to nano? Only you are changing the arrangement of the atoms. That's why sometimes you are telling it bulk, sometimes thin film, sometimes nano. Right? If you take nano gold, it never looks yellow, rather it looks red. Nano gold particles, right? You see the difference. Bulk gold looks yellow, nano gold looks red, but same gold atoms are there. Who made it? Arrangement only. How these arrangement of atoms are there in nano and bulk and thin film, you have to understand. Then only you can characterize, otherwise not. That is characterization. Structure property relation. Structure means at atomic level, molecular level, ionic level. How they are arranged by bondings, interactions. You have to understand that to understand all the characters, all the behaviors, right? And that is called as characterization. Bulk gold property is different than thin film gold and again different than nano gold. It is only just because of manipulating the arrangements, nothing else, right? You are manipulating the arrangement of gold atoms. Sometimes you are telling my arrangement is going for bulk, sometimes you are telling my arrangement is thin film, sometimes you are telling my arrangement is nano. That's all. Only arrangement, nothing else. That is manipulation. And why you are doing it? Because the behavior character is sometimes required for us, right? Why you are doing this? The behavior there in bulk is never there in nano. If you require a behavior which is there with nano, what to do? You have to go for nano, right? Similarly, the behavior of bulk gold is never matches with the thin film. The property of thin film gold is never matching with the property of the bulk gold. But if you want the property of gold, but that kind which is there with thin film, what you have to do? There is no alternative way out. You have to make it thin film, right? So depending on your requirement, you have to synthesize the material whatever, whenever is required. That is material science, right? That is the material science. As per our requirement, you have to do to attain the property what is required for us. For example, if I will tell the paper with which you are writing with pen, can you write with any paper and any pen? No, never. Impossible. Right? Impossible. So that tells the character, the property associated with the piece of paper, right, is matching with the property it is required to write by that ink only where that pen is used, right? Any paper cannot be written by one ink. Any ink cannot be written in one paper. Try to differentiate, right? So what does it mean? Character of paper must cooperate with the character of ink to write, otherwise not. And that is the character and property. Characterization. You have to characterize, otherwise you can never use it. What is the purpose of writing? Otherwise you cannot understand, you cannot see anything. So why then that property of ink is required? Otherwise you cannot write. If you want to write, you have to design such kind of ink, right? And such kind of paper. This ink is suitable for this only, not for all. right? Many kinds of papers are coming from industry, but unless you understand which ink will match to write, all ink will never write, because ink has also different characters, different properties. But to understand the property of that ink, you have to reach at molecular level of ink, right? Molecular level of that ink. Similarly, molecular level of that paper where you are writing. So, the character of paper and character of ink are never appeared as from the outside, which you are realizing, never. It only there with the atomic and molecular level. You have to reach there to understand, otherwise not. Like that, all the materials, whatever we are using in our day-to-day activities, is only for certain properties. This is one of the example I told you, because all of you are using it, paper and pen, right? Anything cannot be used as paper, anything cannot be used as ink, right? It has certain properties, that is why you are choosing this paper, that ink. And similarly, any material, it may be bucket, it may be a textile material which you are wearing, must have certain property which benefits us. That is why we have selected, and they are represented, characterized in labs first, then comes to industry, right? First it is designed, characterized in the labs, research labs, then it goes to the industries for mass production. So, unless it is tested in the research lab, it will never go for the industry. No material never comes from the industry unless it is verified, justified from the research labs. So, research lab is the origin of all the products what we are using in our day-to-day activities. All materials that we are using is coming from research lab, right? Ultimately, the source is research lab, whatever you are using in your day-to-day activities. Everything is originated from some research lab somewhere in the world, and that is the importance of characterization, right? That is the importance of characterization, because to understand the property you have to characterize it, and to characterize a material you should have to understand the structure, fine structure. What is the arrangement of atoms, molecules and ions in it? Then you can understand why this material is behaving in this way, like gold, right? Like gold. It is only because of manipulating arrangement of atoms of gold. You are telling sometimes it is bulk, sometimes thin film, sometimes nano. Just arrangement, nothing else. But abruptly changing behaviors are associated with bulk, thin film and nano. Although only gold atoms are involved, nothing else, everywhere, right? Everywhere gold atoms are used, but I cannot tell this is bulk, it is only nano. I cannot tell it is bulk, it is only thin film, right? I cannot take this bulk as nano or thin film. Why? Because of the arrangement of gold atoms are different from one to another. That's why. That's why their behaviors are different, properties are different. So now tell all the properties, whatever is required for us, are originated from where? From where they are originated? Atoms, molecules, ions, nothing else, right? All the properties, whatever it may it be mechanical, thermal, magnetic, electric, whatever, all are originated at that level, right? So then now, why I am telling the example? Because if I will tell it looks yellow, if you make the pieces of gold, even if you are going to a visible range, it looks yellow or something different. Make it pieces, small pieces, till you can visualize, but still it is yellow color or something else, yellow color, right? Then the process that you are doing is mathematically called as the differentiation, right? Is the differentiation from a big property, you are gradually going towards atoms. You are doing differentiation from big to small. But if you make them together, it is integration, just the reverse way, right? So first you understand the atoms, then combine them, that is integration. First understand the big, go to the small, the process is differentiation. That is the importance of differentiation and integration in physics, right? Both are equally important. Both are equally important. If you are understanding the property of any material, you can reach at the visible range of that material by the process called as differentiation. Or if it is reverse, you know the property of the smallest particle that you can visualize, then combining them together to get a big object, then you are doing integration, and that is the importance of differentiation and integration in physics, right. That is why vector calculus also needs that to understand physics. So, you have to learn about that calculus, which you call as the differential calculus or integral calculus, right. So, then regarding calculus part, if you tell, another thing is very important, you know, suppose for example, why you are telling this dx, you know x is this direction, any direction you can take it as x with respect to the reference frame, right. I can take this is direction x, let us say, right. Then infinitesimally small displacement x is what? Infinitesimally small. It is a big distance, right. It is a big distance, you represented as x vector, right. But if I will make first half, then quarter, then further divide, ultimately you are looking coming to a small range that is also visualized by us again, right. Then what you are doing there? That is differentiation. Mathematically you are telling it is dx, right. What is the dx? It comes from x only. Unless you understand x, you can never tell what is dx, right. Dx is the infinitesimal small amount associated with big amount, that is differentiation, infinitesimally small part of that big x, right. So, if I will take a function x f(x), right, I can now differentiate. It can be differentiated only with respect to x, right, only with respect to x. But if a quantity f is represented by x, y and z in space, maybe, right, let a quantity is represented in space by 3 variables x, y, z, right, then what will you tell there? How will you do the differentiation? 3 variables are there, that is partial differentiation. So, try to understand the difference. Simply differentiation and partial differentiation, that is the difference, because when you are differentiating with respect to x, others are not touching, you are not touching with that, that is why it is partial. But here you cannot, you must have to do it, because there is only one variable, that is x. It is differentiation, but cannot call as partial differentiation, cannot, because there is only one variable, but here there are 3. When doing with respect to one, other must remain constant. You are not bothering about these 2 other variables, then that is partial, right, and they are represented by del f del x, right. What does it mean? Symbolically it tells it is partial differentiation of f with respect to x. The symbol tells d and del. Del never goes for differentiation, all the time for partial differentiation. Similarly, del never goes for simply differentiation, it is only partial. So, if I will tell now, how can I represent this dx vector? This dx vector, right? If x is a vector, dx is also a vector. Then how to represent that? Then I can write this is nothing but equal to what? Right? Then y, then z, right. You try to understand what I have written, right. So, differentiation of function with respect to x in that direction plus difference of same function with respect to y in y direction plus difference of the same function with respect to z in z direction, and that is nothing but your dx vector, right. Sorry, df, f vector, df, not x, because it has 3 variables x, y and z. That is why partial difference is required. You cannot differentiate directly, it must be partially, right. That is why here is x component, y component, z component, when they are added together, that is the resultant. So, that is called now to differentiate what do you mean by partial differentiation and what is only differentiation. They are not same, the processes are altogether different. Partial comes when more than one variables are involved, but if it is only one variable, it can never be partial, never, right. So, that is the process called as differentiation, and like that many vectors are there in physics, you have to do accordingly, right. It is general representation dx, it may be df, force, intensity, any other quantity, but you should have to understand in a similar way, because many vectors are involved in physics, all are represented in the similar way in differentiation as well as integration, right. If I will integrate this small x, let us say x vector dx vector, then from limits something to something, then ultimately the result is also a vector. But what you are doing then? From small to big, adding them. Addition is integration. First analyze the small, then go on adding to get the big. That process is called as integration, right. So, that part we will do next class onwards, try to go and learn about this differentiation of vectors, right. What do you mean by that? What is its physical significance? What it tells?